I'm Nancy Mogab. I'm the chair of the program. We have been doing this program, oh my fans, thank you. We've been patching this together since about 2009, and I know some of you, many of you have been coming for a long time, and for those that have not, welcome, and we hope you enjoy this session for this fall season. We have a couple of repeat topics, which we do periodically, and some we have put in because it's an election year, and there's always new things that are happening. Immigration is the next one, which I think you'll find very interesting. MICA is an immigration nonprofit group that is really doing some terrific stuff here in the St. Louis area, and they're going to do 2 presentations, 2 different hours next week. What we are waiting, I'm actually substituting for our president, who was just elected last week at the Missouri Bar annual meeting, Dana Tippin Cutler, and she had an unexpected, had to leave town. She lives in Kansas City, and so I'm covering for her. Judge Van Amburg from the Missouri Court of Appeals Eastern District is flying in from New York, and apparently she's delayed, so we hope to see her. I'm sure she'll get here as soon as she can. Judge Van Amburg did come. Thank you for. She's here, and she is on the. She's now in the Court of Appeals, Eastern District of Missouri, but she was in the city of St. Louis as a circuit judge for many years. And they're tough, but I still think St. Louis County does, so is judges. We also have another member of our committee, and also as a former member of the Board of Governors of the Missouri. She's a wonderful person, and she's a trial judge, associate circuit judge on the 21st Circuit, St. Louis City, and was sworn in July of 2015. July of 2015. I just wanted, she is up for retention this year, so I'm happy to have her. I asked her to come up here and speak. She didn't ask to come up here to speak, but I wanted to just give your background.
And my name is Nicole Colbert-Botchway. I am a resident of St. Louis City. I grew up in North St. Louis. I went to Rosati Kane High School, went to St. Louis University for undergrad and for law school. Graduated from law school in 1996. I started applying to be a judge under the Non-Partisan Court Plan in 2002. And after 13 years and with the support of many other judges like Judge Van Amburg and guidance, I finally made a panel in 2015 under our current governor, Jay Nixon. Interview process currently is a public interview process, which means that any citizen can sit in on the interviews. I interviewed with 2 lay commissioners who are appointed by the governor, 2 attorneys who are elected by the roles of the Missouri Bar, and 1 appellate court judge. This is a precursor for the pop quiz that you guys are going to have later.
I'll tell you how they did, all right?
1 Court of Appeals judge who is the presiding judge of the Court of Appeals, and Judge Van Amburg is the former presiding judge of the Missouri Court of Appeals. So as a presiding judge, you would preside over that commission of 5 individuals and interview all of the applicants. And then you would pick the 3 most qualified applicants out of that pool and submit those 3 names to the governor. And then the governor does his round of interviews and selects 1 person to be appointed. And I was in fact appointed on July the 5th of 2015.
Well deserving. Yes, very good, Judge. And with that, bang. And she's now serving in what division?
Thank you.
But that's spectacular.
So after you serve for 12 months, then you are on the ballot for retention the following election year. So I'm in fact on the ballot for retention in November. Since I started in July, I started out in the civil jury trial division, in St. Louis City, which is Division 29. And we rotate, the associate circuit judges rotate every January. So in January, I rotated to Division 24, which is criminal misdemeanor jury trial division. So I just finished up a trial today. I don't know if anyone here has served on a jury pool in St. Louis City or on a pool that came through my Division 24. But of course, jury service is very, very, very important. I know that's not the purpose of this evening's session, but jury service is very, very important, and we appreciate all of you all who have served and who will serve in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate it. So she was here to help just check in everybody because we're in a new place, and she has to get home. So I really wanted her just to say a few words before she took off. So thank you, Judge. See you soon. And so, are you mic'd yet? Where's our?
I just want to kind of put a period on the end of that sentence
Okay.
because jury service really is because our founders decided that these disputes that we have with each other should be resolved by the community, the people, not the judges. The judges, not your senators, not your legislators, not the president, not the governor, but your fellow citizens. And that is a very unique quality of the third branch of government. And jury service is very, it's a big sacrifice, especially for the people, I think, in the city of St. Louis. St. Louis County, I hear people say, well, I haven't been called for jury service, and I've never been called for jury service, or I've been called for jury service every 7 or 8 years at the most. In the city, it's more like every 2 or 3 years now. So it's becoming a real sacrifice. But when I was a trial judge, I realized that I saw the jurors come in very resentful. But when they're chosen and they sit through a trial, then they are very glad they did it. And it's because they realize they're a key component, a key element of our justice system. So I just want to finish Judge Botchway's sentence.
No, it is. How many of you have served as jurors? Pretty good.
Right.
I know one time I asked that, and we had somebody that had served something like 8 times. She here? Yep. You served a lot? It wasn't you. It was somebody a little bit different that I remember. Or was it you? Did you?
It might have been me because I had been on juries, called to jury duty at least every other year, every 3 or 4 years since I was 21 years old.
In the city or in the county?
In the city. And now I've just been called for grand jury duty.
All right.
It's a big sacrifice.
We are now, they're videotaping these. I'm so lucky to get the first video on it. So we have podcasts. If you go to the public website, you can listen to prior, I think we've been doing that, 3 years, Farrah? Yeah. It's about there, you can download a session. They're about an hour long. And now there'll be video with that as well. So we're trying that out, see how it works. A couple more things I would like to mention. I mentioned Dr. Ann Craver is a lawyer who's been with the committee. She's here. Thank you for coming, Ann. She always has good ideas and helps us get speakers. I want to introduce you to Farrah Fife, who is our Media Relations Director over the Missouri Bar. And she's in charge of trying to make the mini law school works here in St. Louis, as well as Columbia, Springfield,
and Cape Girardeau.
And Cape's on the way.
We're having our first one in Cape Girardeau in 2 weeks. So,
right.
But kudos to all of you because you're interested in your legal system and you want to learn. You're continual learners, and we appreciate you coming. We appreciate you working with our registrar, Becky Libbert, and getting registered through our new online process or by calling in. If you have any questions at any point in time or ever have a suggestion for a topic, please don't hesitate to contact us because we want to make this something that you love and you want to continue to come to.
And I mentioned Anna is also from the Missouri Bar back there with the camera. Hey, Anna.
So if she's taking your photo, you might see it on Facebook later.
Smile for her. And Becky, you mentioned Becky. Becky's the one that registers. She's not here tonight, so, but appreciate your cooperation. We do this in the spring and the fall. We'll be doing it probably again in the spring. January is usually when we set up the program. Be patient. Anybody that's been registered, we usually send a what do you do for that? You send a...
So, we send out an email to anybody who's a past attendee of the program, and you get first dibs at registration. So we alert you before we alert the general public. And as long as we have a good email address for you on record, you will get that from us. And usually for the spring program, we're sending that out in the first part of February.
One thing, Darlene checks everybody in every week, and so we really appreciate it. Kind of helps us keep track of our numbers. If you can remember just to go to her. Sometimes there's handouts. Usually there's always handouts because nobody gets anything done ahead of time. But a few do, but that you can put in your binder. She checks you in. She probably can answer. She knows just about as enough bad law as the rest of us. So is it her cousin? Is on Judge Sweeney in the city of St. Louis. So, but anyway, check in with her, and I think that's about it on our housekeeping today. Did we cover everything? And we can start this. So, the state of Missouri is really a leader in the selection of judges in this country. For those of you who have heard or read about this, you should at least remember and hold your head high because it's really been a wonderful program that has been replicated across the country in some fashion. They're not all the same. I think there were 34 states we talked about.
It's called the Missouri Plan all over the country.
Yes. So when people talk about the selection process, they do refer to it as the Missouri Plan. And you know, it's a great. So we're celebrating now this says 75, that was last year, it's 76 years. We haven't updated this. We'll go to the next slide here.
So the basic element of the Missouri Non-Partisan Court Plan is the role of the voters in the selection of state judges. And we understand that all judges in the state of Missouri are accountable to the voters and the law. The process of selecting or electing judges is in the Missouri Constitution, starting in 1940 with the new nonpartisan court plan. And I think we're going to talk later about the history of how it came about. But the idea was to make the judges accountable to the voters and primarily to the rule of law, which should determine the outcome in any courtroom, as opposed to campaign contributions, as opposed to political connections, which Missouri, was initially modeled on the federal system, which requires the legislature to get involved and the executive branch to get involved from the beginning. And we can see how well that's working for the federal government right now. The federal judiciary is seriously understaffed because of gridlock in Washington. And so the Missouri Plan was the first plan of its nature to work into the Constitution the participation of the voters.
So basically, Missouri has a combination of selection of judges, which accounts for why we have elections in some parts of our state, and in the larger populated areas, 5 counties to be exact, we use the nonpartisan court plan selection, as well as for our appellate courts and the Supreme Court. So we have a mixed group here. And the reason why it was set up that way, which we'll get into the weeds on this a little bit, but right now we have St. Louis City and St. Louis County. All those judges are selected by use of the nonpartisan selection process. You go to St. Charles, they hold partisan elections. They run as a Republican or a Democrat. Jefferson County, Franklin County, Union County, Cole County, which is Jefferson City, Jackson County, and, well, I can't remember, Platte County, and Springfield, Greene County, all use the nonpartisan court plan. Greene County, which is Springfield, was the latest. That community decided in 2008 to go to the merit selection process for their trial judges. Circuit judges, when we say circuit judges, they're trial judges. We have, how many circuits do we have, Judge, in the state? 145. We have 145 circuits that represent areas of Missouri. They have circuit judges and they have associate circuit judges. Circuit means trial judges for the state, just to clear that up.
So the trial courts, the counties that have trial courts can decide whether they want to be a part of the nonpartisan court plan. The appellate courts are all part of the nonpartisan court plan. The judges are selected by a merit selection committee of people on all the appellate levels. So I was a trial judge in the city for 9 years. I'm now an appellate judge in the intermediate appellate court, which is right between the trial court and the Missouri Supreme Court. All of the appellate judges, including the Supreme Court, are selected under this merit selection commission plan.
So now we have a video. We have a video. So with Judge Holstein, who's a retired judge from Springfield, right? Springfield, I think. The question was, in case you didn't hear it while we're trying to get our video up, was what's the vote for Judge Nicole Colbert Botchway, which is a long name, but she's really a wonderful person, wonderful judge, good lawyer. She worked for the Attorney General's office before she became an associate circuit judge. It's a retention vote for the merit selection. That means after her term every 4 years, and there's different terms for different levels of judges. For her, it's 4 years. Every 4 years, she has to run for retention. After the first 12 months, after she's appointed by the governor, she runs for retention. Then another 4 years, she runs for retention. Another 4 years, retention. The vote is yes or no. You say no, she's out. All right? You say yes, she gets another 4 years.
And in this election, that's going to be way down on the ballot, right? The
Right.
judges are last, I think.
Usually the judges are last.
It's a long ballot this year.
I mean, we don't care when they are, but they're not usually up high on. They're after the yes,
we'll
Ann?
talk about that.
Does the Missouri bar still produce, like they have in the past, opinions
Yes.
of attorneys that come before these judges for the public to
Attorneys, jurors give their opinion, and even staff people, right?
Staff people, and they just added, and we'll talk about that in the end. So what they're talking about is, since actually for a long time, I think almost 50 years, they used to ask just the lawyers, what do you think about the judge, or they up for it? And the lawyers would get a note saying, kind of up, yes or no, should we retain or not? I remember that? Am I correct about that? I remember, and I've been practicing for 34 years. And then we went to, in 1992, I think it was, or the early 90s, we expanded this to say, we need more information. So the Missouri Bar, the Supreme Court actually orders us to do this, but we were doing it in some fashion before that. We set up an evaluation process where we get input from lawyers that regularly appear in front of these particular judges that are up for retention, jurors that come in, meet the judge, observe the manner in which the judge is ruling on decisions in cases and evidence, and then staff also, I think, feeds in. Fair as they've expanded it on this last ruling.
So court staff do not contribute to the evaluation process or the review process, but there's juror surveys as well. So if trial court judges have oversee jury trials, jurors are asked to provide answers to 10 questions in a survey, and that's turned in, and the committee reviews that. In addition to the lawyer surveys, those lawyer surveys have nearly 20 questions on them, ranging from things that, such as, are they timely in their opinions? Do their opinions, are they well written, and do they follow the rule of law?
This is going to kill me.
A number of things. Also, their demeanor in the courtroom. How do they treat those who appear before them in court? And then this exciting thing is that in 2018, we have permission from the court to expand the information that the Judicial Performance Review Committee collects, and that's going to include surveys from litigants. So if you happen to appear before a judge as a litigant in a case, you will now have the opportunity to complete a survey. And that's really important because that means that it's people who are filling out these surveys, providing this information, are the individuals, whether they be lawyers or non-lawyers, who have direct interaction with those judges. They see how they perform day in and day out. And so we're really excited to be adding that feature in the next 2 years.
Do we get the video going? Okay. Can you hold that thought, or you want us to?
Just a quick shot. Now, you've taken all these surveys. Where do we, the voters, determine what the results of that?
So it's all of those surveys, all of that information is made available to you and every voter in the state of Missouri at yourmissourijudges.org. We're actually going to be publishing the 2016 results tomorrow. They'll be announced at a press conference tomorrow afternoon, and that information is available to you. The committee takes all of that information and they cast a vote. They vote to see how many members of the 21-member committee believe that that judge is substantially meeting overall judicial performance standards. But here's the catch. As a voter, that's up for you to decide. They provide the information, they provide the vote tally that they came up with, but this is information for you as a voter to decide, is that judge doing a good job? Do I want them to stay or do I want them to go? And then you can go to the polls using this information to form your own opinions.
We'll get back to this because this is a whole nother section, but that website is in this brochure, if you grabbed one, on the bottom of the third page for you to do it online.
Yeah. This information will be part of the St. Louis Post Dispatch Voters Guide, which they partner with the League of Women Voters to produce.
Right. So we'll get back to it. So let's watch the video and we'll get back. This is kind of at the end of the.
Now, in rural areas, everybody knows everybody. So an elective system works very well in the rural areas of the state. When you get to the Court of Appeals, if we had an elective system, you just couldn't imagine how much money it would take to get elected, even in the Southern District. You would have to buy media ads in the large newspapers. You would have to have advertising on radio, and you would have to travel. There's a tremendous cost associated with that, and you would probably have to have an election staff.
So we really have the best of both worlds here. In a smaller community, where you have the opportunity to probably meet your judge. They go to church, they go to many activities. The smaller communities probably have the ability to know the individual that they're electing, as opposed to when you get to the St. Louis area, metropolitan St. Louis area, Kansas City area, and Springfield, which really has grown quite a bit since I started practicing. You almost went so big. What's the likelihood of any of you meeting one of the judges that are up for election? Slim and none, unless you have a case, or you're a juror, or a number of other factors.
And I just want to say, even in the rural areas in Missouri, where there are partisan elections, still the judges are acutely aware of the importance of just simply following the principles of law, because they are going to be accountable to the voters. You know, whether you don't walk into a courtroom in the rural Missouri too much and hear a judge thanking someone for their campaign contribution. You know, just it's not that way in smaller areas where everyone knows everyone and everyone's accountable to everyone. What sparked the Nonpartisan Court Plan in Missouri in 1940 was the political machines in the large urban areas that were pay to play. You know, we know what pay to play is. We have unlimited campaign contributions in Missouri. But there was that with selecting judges, and that's when the voters of the state of Missouri rose up and said, no more of that, you know, in the larger urban areas. But there's so the nonpartisan court plan was spawned by political corruption in large urban areas. We don't see that, at least, you know, that I know of.
So I didn't write this ad, but it looks pretty good. Wanted. You agree with that, Judge?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That is good. Experienced licensed attorney with thorough knowledge of the laws of Missouri, qualification number 1. 2, must serve as a courtroom umpire, rendering fair and impartial justice, able to control the courtroom while making decisions that impact people and communities, businesses and families. The umpire, calling the shots according to the rules. You know, that's what baseball, that's what football umpires do. Must be able to determine punishments within statutory guidelines. We as judges do not just have free rein to impose a sentence. We have to stay within the range of punishment enacted by the legislature for various crimes. Must manage a docket and must be able to do all this in a manner that maintains society's respect for the law and the assurance of a fair day in court. Manage a docket. That means you've got, you know, a lot of people wanting to get to trial, wanting to get their cases heard. In domestic relations cases, it's critical that the case move expeditiously. There are children at issue, there's property at issue. Judicial economy and efficiency is an important responsibility that the judge has to move the case.
Next slide. So, and again, that's a picture of our current Supreme Court of Missouri. We have the far right, or would be Judge Paul Wilson. Is he up for retention this year?
Yeah, just Judge Titleman.
Oh, Judge Titleman.
The far right is Judge
Okay.
Titleman.
Is Judge, in the back row, Judge Paul Wilson. He's the last judge that was appointed to the Supreme Court. Judge Lars Stith, Judge George Draper from St. Louis. Judge Lars Stith is from from Kansas City originally. Judge Paul Wilson is from Cole County, Jefferson City area. Next to Judge Draper, who's from St. Louis, is Judge Richard Titleman. He's up for retention this year. He turned 70 next year, so this will be his last. He has to retire at the age of 70. That's the law, unfortunately, because 70 looks younger to me every day. And you know, when we have experienced good judges, you hate to lose them if they you squeeze a few more years out of them. Judge Patty Breckenridge is on the sitting down. She's our current Chief Justice. Judge Mary Rhodes Russell is in the middle, and Judge Zell Fisher is on the end. And Judge Fisher is from Maryville, Missouri, which is on the far western north area. Judge Mary Rhodes Russell now resides in Jefferson City, but she was from Hannibal area. And Judge Patty Breckenridge was on the Western District of the Missouri Court of Appeals in Kansas City before going on the bench. Yes?
In rural areas, once someone's been elected the first time, is it a retention vote?
It's a partisan election each time.
I think what you said about rural areas not being susceptible to political shenanigans is pretty naive. I've spent a lot of time in rural areas where there's elected judges, and you're talking about people, outside groups making huge contributions and things like that.
That's a recent phenomenon then.
Right.
In Cole County.
What area are you talking about?
Not in Missouri, but in another state that has a similar system.
So Cole County, the trial judges decide constitutionality of state statutes. And that county has been susceptible to outside money. And there have been some very noteworthy elections in Cole County, which is Jefferson City, around that issue of outside money coming in. But I mean, in a lot of the small towns in Missouri, there's not much money that goes into the campaigns. It's just
But there
yard
are,
signs, basically.
there are pretty sophisticated national groups that, it's just like with
Yes.
school boards.
That's a recent
that-
event, yeah.
Yeah, where, and I'm wondering if there's any movement in the state to take what you do in urban areas and expand that, or is
That's
that
up
a
to the
decision?
county.
Okay, that.
Yeah, I mean, if the residents are fed up with it, they could.
So each county gets to vote. So in 2008, before 2008, when I think it was almost at the Associate Circuit Judges went to merit selection in the late 1970s in St. Louis City County and Jackson. But 2008 was the last time a county in Missouri has voted. And they had a huge, it was a big deal and big election. And there was money coming in from all kinds of things on this. We don't want that. We want to retain elections or not.
I will tell you, there is outside money coming into Missouri on referendums that you might see on the ballot. You might have seen them last year and the year before, to change the Missouri Non-Partisan Court Plan to let the governor appoint or let the legislature approve, or something different about it, and all of that has been funded by outside money. So that's where we see the outside money mostly, is on these proposed changes to the Missouri Non-Partisan Court Plan that come from outside Missouri, because they want to target Missouri because Missouri started it. So if they don't like the nonpartisan court plan merit process, they want more political influence in it, they might finance a ballot measure. And Farrah informs me there is a petition going around in Cole County to join the nonpartisan court plan. If enough citizens sign it, it'll get on the ballot.
But is that still viable? Yeah. So actually, Cole County, which is the seat of our government, and where, as Judge Van Amburg said, those circuit judges, those trial judges get those constitutional questions. They initially make the call on not necessarily constitutional, but they do on ballot, what goes on the ballot, how it's written on the ballot.
How it's worded.
Right, how it's worded, and they get a lot of tough questions.
They interpret new statutes that come out of the legislature. Fewer and fewer lawyers are in the legislature, so a lot of the statutes that are passed will cause you to scratch your head. So they interpret those.
So there's been over the last, including the last election, there's been targeted attacks against those judges. Large sums of money coming in. The last minute, 2 weeks, it was Judge Joyce, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks, 3 weeks, what was it?
More than $300,000.
More than $300,000 came in 3 weeks before her election from an outside, non-Missouri, right?
Yeah, they wait till the last minute.
Unknown, because we don't know, although we do know it was outside of the state of Missouri. The money came from a PAC from outside the state of Missouri. And she ended up winning. And she's a very good judge. She won her retention vote. Prior to the vote, I think her opponent had very little support and no money. And then this basically filled it, lots of ads, but she was retained. But that is happening. So each community each circuit can say, we're tired of elections. We have partisan elections. You run as a Republican, you run as a Democrat.
The city and the county and the urban areas have to be done.
Right. If they choose to do it, then they can do it. It's not an easy process. And so far, we have a mixed plan in Missouri. So we have parts of the state that run on partisan elections. There are rules on. They raise money, but there are certain rules that they have to follow, I think, on not saying they take positions on certain areas, because, of course, if they did start saying what they were going to take positions on, it would interfere with their ability to perhaps rule on a case that might come before them. And so there are some guidelines for those partisan elections. In St. Charles, I think, is probably the next largest area. They're very happy with their system, but it's costing a judge probably $150,000, I think, to run for a job that doesn't pay that much.
So how would you feel if you walked into the courtroom, your case is being heard for trial, and you hear the judge thanking the opposing attorney for his campaign contribution? Do you think you'd get a fair trial? I mean, the problem is the perception of impartiality. Judges are supposed to maintain, it's an interesting wording of the Judicial Code of Ethics. We have a Code of Ethics that says you are to maintain the appearance of impartiality. That's a nod to the fact that we're all human beings and we have opinions, of course, but it's upon us to maintain the appearance of impartiality so that everyone in the courtroom feels that they have a chance at a fair trial. So that's a problem when you get into the $100,000.
Right. And, actually, I know some judges that run in partisan elections, some choose not to know. They have a blind, there's somebody, a treasurer, they choose not to know who has donated to them. But there's no rule about that. So you can know, and, I don't know one way or the other, but that they know. But some judges, there's no, state rule or court rule or constitutional rule that says judge can't know how much money anybody gave it to them, and doesn't necessarily, although they has to recuse themselves on a case. So, right?
Yeah, if I'm going to give you an opinion on a very specific issue that's going to come before me later, I may have to take myself off that case. So why would I do that, really?
Yeah. So we're at this is a pyramid, because we talk about just what the kinds of judges in state court. So we've got the Supreme Court, there's 7 of them. They're at the top. Then we have 3 divisions for the appellate courts. Judge, pick it from there, right? She's on the Eastern District.
Which is the eastern side of the state. That's where I am. The Southern District, and then the Western District. So there are 3 divisions of the Missouri Court of Appeals, but they're all part of the same court. We are one court, Missouri Court of Appeals. But
3 divisions.
The process is key to each of those districts.
And we have 22 appellate judges amongst all those courts. That's what it says. So we have more than that?
More than that, yeah.
I was wondering why it said 22, because I thought there should be 32. Yeah. I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't count right, but there's 13. How many are on?
We're 14.
14 in the Eastern. We're the largest in Missouri.
I think it's just 12 or 13 in the Western District, and whatever the balance is.
We'll get our slides ready.
We have the largest caseload
Yeah.
here, so we have, we are, the intermediate appellate courts are appeals courts as a matter of right. Anyone who loses in the trial court below has a right to appeal it to us, not to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decides frequently what cases to take.
So somebody appeals, they don't have the right. They can't say no. We don't want to decide that case. Go away.
We have the largest
Right.
caseload.
And while we're on the appellate courts, they in general sit in panels of 3.
3 judges.
3 judges will hear a case. Occasionally, you will sit on en banc, which is
All 14 of them.
all 14 of them will hear a case. And then there's 400 plus circuit judges or trial judges and associate circuit judges. Associate circuit judges have different terms, 4 years. The circuit judges have 6-year terms. It's mainly, we're going to talk about the differences between those two. Does anybody care?
We have 12-year terms. I'm done.
12-year terms. Appellate court has 12-year terms.
I'm going to be forcibly retired in 2 years. Yeah.
Too bad. So we go trial level. What are you on next? The next one is, well, this is just kind of a timeline. I thought it was kind of funny. The Declaration of Independence that, really only addressed the federal system, so it didn't deal anything with the states. It only talked about that judges shall be selected. It's very, very minimum, if I remember correctly. with the advice and consent of the
Just
Senate.
not by the king.
Yeah, it didn't discuss at all what the states were supposed to do, and frankly, they didn't want them to discuss it. If you remember the history of our federalism that kind of grew into it, but at the time, the early colonial years mainly were by appointments in most of the states. The governors just appointed people. In the 1830s, President Jackson brought in the election process, which kind of took the country. And I think isn't the United States one of the few states that does elections? Not states, country that does elections. Am I correct on that? I'm pretty sure it is. So, yeah, it is unique to this country that we have election of judges and that they aren't some form of appointment. In the 1930s, Judge Van Amburg brought up the Tom Pendergast. Do we have a video? Is that coming up? So we're going to play the video and it'll explain that. And then from 1940 was when we adopted the Nonpartisan Court Plan, and that's what we have today. So why don't you play the video, which I think should be next.
Back in the 30s, and actually all the way back to 1850, we elected all of our judges here in the state of Missouri, including Supreme Court judges. Over a period of time, politicians figured out that they could basically buy judges. The most successful person to do that was a guy named Tom Pendergast, who operated a political machine out of Kansas City.
They would literally buy votes, where some of the bosses would pay somebody to go vote a certain way.
If Pendergast wanted you on the Supreme Court, you could get elected.
He tried to pack the court with appointees of his political persuasions. The people of Missouri did not want that.
And so this merit selection was thought to be a better way of doing it.
A group of people got together actually right here at the Tiger Hotel in Columbia, Missouri, in December of 1937 to create what was called the Administration for the Institute of Justice.
About every prominent lawyer in the state at the time rose up, fought back, and took this plan as a way to return the courts to the people so that it wasn't in the hands of the politicians like Pendergast.
A man named Kenneth Teasdale, who was a prominent St. Louis lawyer, got a number of people involved.
There were 80 or 90 people, all told, who came here to find a way to improve judicial selection.
These people were all Democrats and Republicans. It was a wonderful thing. They worked together.
They saw the need to be proactive and make sure that our court system is always of the highest quality and sound. And the Missouri Plan is certainly that.
People campaigned without any financial interest in it whatsoever, up and down the state, and got it adopted by a majority of the people in 1940.
It was a proposal that was put forth by a number of people on a national level. It became known as the Missouri Plan because we were the first to do it.
And it was very, very well accepted.
And there have been a number of attacks on it over the years, but it has stayed, it has survived, and it has served us very well.
So is that the Court of Appeals? Uh-huh. Okay, so that's the Court of Appeals in the old post office, and some of it was down in the Supreme Court though, wasn't it? Yeah. So we have a number of retired judges, Supreme Court judges that were in that video, which was Judge Price and Judge Michael Wolf, who's the Dean of the St. Lucie Law School. I think he's come to us a couple times. Judge Price is in private practice now, but he actually did a great program for the Maine Law School a couple years ago on recidivism in prisons. So we are moving on here to, basically we can't, I think it's time, 76 years, we've been pretty lucky. It's worked pretty well. We get pretty decent judges. Not just decent, we get great judges. And the process has been great. It minimalizes the politics, although there's always politics in everything, in terms of who applies, who gets selected, and and then takes it out after they're there, though. I really think that they have that non-pressure to perform for an audience on their decisions. They're really just concentrating on the cases and the laws, and that's the way it should be in making their decisions. Want to move on? Huh? Yeah, go ahead, and Judge, you can read that. I can't.
Oh, well, we talked about, the benefits of the plan. I think the most important one is judges are free from fear of losing their job for doing what the law requires. As Nancy said, you can't get politics out of almost anything anymore. Politics with a little p means that people who are interested in their community and in the political process are going to pick up the phone and call you with their opinions. That doesn't mean you have to, do what they ask you to do. So there is that form of politics in judicial selection. When I chaired the commission last year, I got a lot of phone calls from a lot of people, lawyers, non-lawyers, about this or that candidate, and I call that politics. But the point I'm making is that I feel like I can do my job and follow the rule of law. There's an expression, let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. That's one thing, the heavens falling. The other thing is losing your job. And so, you'd almost, if you had to worry about losing your job about every case you decided, it would not be good. It would be not pretty in the courtroom.
So far, talked about appointment and retention. Will you either tonight or at some time in the future talk about criteria for review?
Yeah, we will. We'll cover that. So real quickly, we're going to get back here to the, this is the map of Missouri. And you can see up there, if you can see closely, we have the black spots are where the circuit courts are, where the merit selection takes place, except for the courts. So we have the Supreme Court, that's merit selection, the Court of Appeals, which are in the eastern, western, and southern, and then the circuit courts, there's 6, St. Louis City, County, Jackson County, Clay, Platte, which is on the western side and around the Kansas City area, and then Greene County, which is Springfield. And now we have, how do we do this? Is this an animation? So this is our animation.
So there's an opening. What we do is we post the opening on Your Missouri Courts. It's our bulletin board for applicants to apply. And we tell them, you can get the application, download it, and fill it out. We tell them when the application's due. We tell them when the interviews are going to be, the public interviews of all the applicants. And
let's talk about the application. So I served as the lay representative from the Eastern District. I was the lawyer representative for the Appellate Judicial Commission. And from 2006 to 2007. Judge Van Amburg was the chief judge last year in the Missouri Court of Appeals Eastern District. So she just served as the chief, as a member, a chief judge on the circuit court selection.
For the city and the county.
So the applications are a little bit different, not much.
Yeah,
I don't know if
they're quite extensive.
But they're 15 pages or longer. In addition to the 15 pages for the appellate, all kinds of questions. We want to know everything about your legal experience, work history, kinds of cases you've handled, list the cases that you've handled, if you've done appellate work, hopefully, because if you're applying for an appellate judge, you have some, give us those cases. You're allowed to give us 3 writing samples, and then you must have 5 references that you ask by people and give it. You can get more, you can have people write letters to us as well, but you must have 5. And those reference letters are usually a couple pages long. Those are people that know you. Sometimes it's lawyers, sometimes it's your pastor, or you're a rabbi, or it's some community service area where you have somebody that has known you a long time. They're all different, and they're all important that we consider and read and even call on occasion to discuss the individual if we feel that we need more information. Your application is similar for the circuit judges, correct?
Yes. I mean, we asked people to list the trials that they've handled, whether they were jury trials, whether they were what we call judge-tried bench trials. We asked for their publications. Have you published anything? We, of course, asked for their work history, their entire work history back as far as it goes. And you know, why they left each job. It's quite an extensive application process. It's very labor intensive. It takes a lot of time to fill out.
There's also a character and fitness component to it, which every lawyer is required to undergo when they get their license. So you have to have, and that goes back through everything. If you've ever been charged with anything, you are required as a lawyer, I don't care if it's jaywalking, to report it. That is also re-verified and checked as well. Here's your commission.
The 2 citizens are appointed by the governor. The 2 lawyers are elected by the bar in the city or the county. This is a recent development in the Nonpartisan Court Plan. The names of the applicants and the interviews are now open to the public. That started under Chief Judge Stith's term, I think, in the Missouri Supreme Court.
Judge Stith or Judge Price? One of the two. I can't remember.
And she put it into effect. There was some pushback. The lawyers who apply for these jobs some of them didn't like to tell their clients or their partners that they were applying, because there was some, you know, tension in that. If you find out your lawyer's applying for the bench, you're going to go ask your lawyer, what's going to happen to my case, you know, or your partners are going to.
Who's going to handle your case?
Worry about the finances. So, but that's been changed, and it's now all open to the public. Even the public can nominate candidates. And most importantly, the public may, and they do. Last year we held our interviews right next door here, thanks to Genevieve Nichols's hospitality and letting us use that, because the courthouse was under construction and we couldn't meet at the courthouse. So we had folks come in there and listen to the interview process as well. And I think I had some discussions with some of you at the break that ultimately, when we finish with the interviews, we deliberate. Now, we do deliberate confidentially. We don't deliberate in public. As a member of the commission, we held our deliberations in private to come up with 3 names, 3 applicants that we send to the governor to consider for appointment of 1 to the vacant seat on the bench.
So the governor has 60 days after he receives the 3 names to choose one of the 3. If the governor does not choose one of the 3, and that has not ever happened, the decision goes back to the commission to choose one of the 3. That's never happened.
We talked about that. You have to stand for retention.
Right. After you're selected, the governor nominates you or selects you. You serve for 1 year. You have a retention vote within the 1 year, up or down by the citizens of Missouri. And if you're a circuit judge, it's going to be in the area where you live or you're serving, St. Louis City, St. Louis County. If you're an appellate judge, it is statewide, right? I mean, Eastern, Western. So Eastern votes for the Eastern judges, but Supreme Court is statewide. Yeah. So this year, there'll just be 1 Supreme Court judge, Judge Titleman. In the Eastern District, we have 2 appellate judges that serve with Judge Van Amburg, Judge Phil
Hess and Judge James Dowd.
Judge
are up for retention.
What's that?
Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, for the Court of Appeals.
An
and
appellate
circuit,
judge?
just in the
Or
circuit.
what's the incentive to go through that ordeal to be?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I was a litigator for 27 years. And so I tried cases regularly before juries, actually. And there came a point in my career when, litigating gets to be pretty tiring. But also I thought, I think I know enough now that I can do this job and I can do it well. And it just was my own personal motivation was to contribute something to the process. There were, in the old days, judges who took the bench who had no trial experience whatsoever, and trial experience is extremely important for a trial judge. Now, for an appellate judge, it's a little broader view of what makes a good appellate judge. Most of the appellate judges have had trial experience because it's not that the trial judge gets reversed every time she makes a mistake, but hopefully the judge will get reversed when the mistake makes a difference in the outcome of the case. And having sat as a trial judge for 9 years before becoming an appellate judge, I think I have a good idea of that, So, but I loved the courtroom, and I wanted to stay in the courtroom, but not as a litigator.
Do you have any idea about how many women are serving and minority folks are serving as judges?
Yes.
Oh, the question, we have to repeat the question.
How many women are serving and how many minority? Do you have those numbers handy?
Do you have the stats on it?
I don't have the stats. I can give you a general idea. I think that the trial bench in the state of Missouri is at least 33% female now, maybe a little less. The appellate bench, pretty similar. The Supreme Court, we just saw quite a few women. People of color, no. We are still really underrepresented. They are still really underrepresented in our Missouri courts, and that is a point of study now. The Missouri Supreme Court has begun to think about something that we call implicit bias, which is subconscious bias that factors into these selection processes. So that means that, well, we all have it. First of all, I think you heard Hillary Clinton say that in the debate. We all have our own biases. That's part of human nature. But the challenge is to figure out, is it making a difference in outcomes in our legislative elections, in our selection of president, and in the selection of judges? So we are not satisfied. I think nobody's satisfied with the underrepresentation of people of color in the state of Missouri bench.
So we have 14 on the, right? We have 14 judges on the Eastern District.
14 judges.
And we now have almost half women.
Almost half women.
Yeah, for the first time ever.
But on my court, yeah.
But not the rest of the appellate courts.
Does anybody, a judge that isn't an attorney?
Municipal judges can, the city paid judges, municipal are city judges. Depends on the city or the county's laws, but they might not be lawyers. But the rest of the bench now, the state judges must.
All the associate circuit and circuit judges are required to have a law license. When you get into some of the other kinds of, and you suggested the municipal, and I'm not even sure about that.
Yeah, there are judges in the rural areas who aren't lawyers.
I'm just kind of wondering.
Yeah, and you know what? That's where most people have their experience with the courts too, is in the municipal courts. So.
This deal about whether there's women or minorities, or that's starting to give me a lot of heartburn, whether it's college admissions or any of this. And if the justice is supposed to be blind, and it doesn't make any difference what this person is, you're trying to get the best qualified to sit on that bench. Not someone just because they're a certain ethnicity or whatever. And this is starting to bother me because we're getting completely away from going for the best to what fits. And, you know, I think this, you know, and you said that the local elections can be outside money, but also it can be biased just to you, and I don't mean anything, but you guys to not have to go into private session to talk about which three you nominate? Why can't it be right out there in front of everybody else? I mean, you know.
Well, because you want to have a frank discussion. You want to have a frank discussion.
Everybody has a flaw.
Yeah. How many job interviews are held in public in the first place? And, you know, for the judges, those are very important jobs. Very important jobs. So the selection process has to be a little protected a little bit.
Go ahead.
Earlier, the judge was here, the first one.
Judge Nicole
She
Ba-
said.
Colbert Botchway, so you can vote for her.
She said that she first applied in 2002 and took her 12 years.
Yeah.
Now, I assume that she applied more than once in that 12 years.
Well, it depends upon the opening. There would not necessarily mean, you know, you can't apply unless there's an opening.
Yeah.
And so she may have applied, I don't know what her first, but it may have been a couple years in between there. There weren't any openings, so she didn't apply.
Okay, but the ones who didn't make it, do they have a review with whoever reviewed them to find out?
If they pick up
They
the
can
phone
call.
and call,
They call.
they will. They'll
They'll call
call
the
and say,
commissioners
what
and
can
ask
I do
them.
different? Where are my weaknesses? You know, how do I improve? And she was one of them who did that. And she was told, get some trial experience. I had this discussion with her, and she'd tell you, at the AG's office, she was working, I think, in, was it child
She
support?
was in child support.
So
started-
then,
which is a
when
beginning
she wanted to
opening.
become a judge, she went to the Attorney General and said, put me in the courtroom. I need to get some courtroom experience. And she did. And she got that courtroom experience, and she got on the bench.
She listen. She really is, she worked. You know, you asked why does somebody want to be a judge? I don't know. Everybody has a different reason why they want to do it, and she knew early on that she really thought she would be. It would suit her, and that she would have a good temperament, and she gave out lots of great good reasons. And trial experience was one of them.
This gentleman has been had.
You said you were a litigator. Was
Oh.
that as a prosecutor or?
No, I wasn't a criminal lawyer. I was a labor lawyer. I represented working people and public employees, and I specialized in federal civil rights and employment law. So I started out in 1975 as a graduate. I started out walking into the courtroom in the federal courthouse right away with the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And I got some wonderful experience because nobody else knew how to do that area of law. We had a Justice Department grant and learned it in law school. But it was a situation where I would look back on it now and say where fools rush in, you know, right out of law school into federal court. And I never was afraid because I didn't know to be afraid. But I developed a lot of trial experience, yeah.
I understand that it's rare that a judge is not retained, but in the event that one was not retained, what would happen to his or her court in the cases that were supposed to be tried? How would those cases be handled, and what would happen with that vacancy until the commission could go through its process?
Yeah, good question. Well, the vacancy would be posted right away, I can tell you that, and the process would start right away. The Missouri Supreme Court has the power to transfer judges from other parts of the state into an area that needs help. And there are judges and senior judges, which I will be in 2 years. I will be a senior judge, and I might pick up the phone from the Supreme Court asking me to fill in somewhere, and I will, you know. But that's the Supreme Court superintends all the courts. They oversee everything, and they're not going to let an area fall behind like that. They'll send a judge in.
So occasionally when the dockets in St. Louis City, which has had a tremendous trial docket, They changed venue statute, but they would bring in judges from the rural areas periodically that aren't as busy, and they would hear cases for a couple weeks at a time. So that kind of happens all over. We'll have one more question and we'll move on, finish this up.
Is the bar going to provide the pamphlet that they have in the past about retaining and not retaining the judges?
Yes, we will. Those will be distributed in the next 2 weeks to St. Louis County and city libraries. The courts will also have copies available. We send them to senior centers. If you would like one, you can call us and request one. We'll mail one to you. So in addition to the information online, we will still provide, we call them our voter's guide. And there's one for the St. Louis area, one for the Kansas City area, and one for Greene County.
So I don't know where we are in this. Is this the vote? Is this the? So this is the next slide that she's bringing it up. So when you go to vote, we will have a pamphlet. You can print it off online. So right now, the state does not pay for this, okay, at all. If they did, we'd be very happy. We'd be happy to mail you one. Some states do pay for this. In other words, we do the evaluation and the state would mail you the results. You can look at everything that's, reviewed yourself, and you can make your decision on your own. If you want, if you're really serious about this, you can look up the judges and you can see the courts are open. You can go sit in on there and do your own study. But right now, the Missouri Bar does provide the evaluations to the public, and we have a limited funds. So we encourage everybody to try and go to the website, correct? But however, we do print a number of paper copies and libraries, and we can mail them to you if you want them, as she said. The announcement for that will be made tomorrow, so you'll see it in the paper. As Ian said, if she's still here, it's in the newspaper website as well. Will be a link there, and we hope that you find that information useful. Some states, Arizona is one of them, pays to mail to every citizen the results of their evaluation process. But we don't have that. But you can write to your legislature and ask for it if you want.
Ask for the funding.
Feel free if you would want to do that.
And you know what this basically does, and I talked about this before, okay, politics gets politics out of it, whatever that means. You cannot get politics out of anything anymore, right? I mean, basically politics is always there, but it does totally get money out of the selection process. There is no money in the Missouri Nonpartisan Court Plan selection process, not a dime.
So we have a video, I think.
I've seen other states move to the Missouri approach. I've also seen other states persist in electing their judges, which is, in my opinion, a far inferior way to select judges.
Generally in states, it costs as much to run for the Supreme Court, sometimes as it costs to run for governor. Millions of dollars. From 1990 until 2000, approximately $83 million was spent for judicial elections. From 2000 to 2010, that number more than doubled to $206 million to influence who would be selected as judges. That kind of money is spent for influence, not good government.
And it's very hard to have confidence in the judicial system when you know that the judges sitting on the bench are beholden to thousands of dollars of campaign contributions.
We've seen that problem express itself in Illinois. We've seen it express itself in West Virginia, where judges who received significant contributions then ruled on cases that affected the people who made the contributions to them.
To a business, it's most important that everyone is on a level playing field, that my business hasn't contributed more to that judge's campaign than a small business when we go to court.
Well, one of the things that has always struck me about election of judges is, can you make a campaign promise to behave a certain way or to rule a certain way in cases?
Well, it would be impossible to get a fair hearing before a judge who'd already made up his mind or her mind before anyone ever stepped into the courtroom.
Folks can go to the ballot box and they can elect, their senators and representatives, they can elect their governors. I mean, that's where the partisanship should be. There's no room for partisanship in the judiciary.
What we have with the nonpartisan court plan in Missouri is superior to the federal model because it involves much less politics.
So there we have it. One other thing we probably haven't talked about, and someone asked me about it at the break, and is there any overseeing mechanism of the judges while they're in office? And we do have a commission that's made up of 3 lawyers appointed by the bar, I believe, right? 3 lay people and 3 retired judges that takes all complaints about a judge around the state and investigates it. It's confidential up to the point where a charge will be made or recommended by the committee, by that committee, and then it goes before the Supreme Court if there's a hearing. Is that correct? So you may have read about it. There's been recently, last week, there was a judge in Lincoln County that was charged, or it was recommended that she be suspended for 6 months, and for various concerns involving, what was it, delaying cases, intimidating lawyers to some effect. I'm not even sure because I was kind of busy last week, but what the whole charges are. So there's a choice. She can, I guess she can appeal it to the Supreme Court. It will be heard in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will decide that's an appropriate charge, that's not an appropriate charge, and that happens. That's the thing. So that happens just like it does for lawyers. There's a separate committee that investigates any and all complaints made against lawyers for all kinds of things. Do we have any more here? Our slides, same thing. This is Judge Robert Thomas. Does anybody know who that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
He came up with the baseball analogy. Judges are like umpires. Umpires don't make the rules, they apply them. Well, the Supreme Court umpires make rules sometimes. The role of an umpire and a judge is critical. They make sure everybody plays by the rules, but it is a limited role. Nobody ever went to a ball game to see the umpire. And back to the jury in the trial courts. The juries are the deciders. They have the hard job. I used to, as a trial judge, think at the end of many trials, boy, am I glad I wasn't on that jury. That was a hard decision that they had to make. So, but this is the participatory element of the judicial branch, the jury system, and they just want to see the judge call the pitches. That's basically it.
What happens when, like, a jury decides somebody's guilty, and you'll see this on the national news sometimes, and then the judge turns around and gives some guy that raped some girl 6 months probation or something, and then there's a big outrage and they want to get rid of the judge. Does that ever happen in Missouri, or is there something? Because even though the jury finds the person guilty, the judge still determines the sentence, doesn't he? Right?
It depends if the person has no, and that's a matter of statute. If the person has no record, the jury has no criminal convictions before, the jury decides the punishment unless the defendant wants the judge to decide the punishment, waives that right to a jury. If you're a repeat offender, then the judge decides the punishment.
Does anybody ever get recalled then because everybody's mad about what the sentence is?
I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it happens.
Because you're elected for 4 years or 6
Yeah.
years or 12 years.
I mean, in the urban areas, it doesn't happen that I know of, but in the smaller areas, if a judge did what that judge did, might not get reelected. I don't think recalled, but might not get reelected.
So they can still finish their term.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess.
Your question is if a judge makes a ruling, in this case it would be a sentence that a lot of the
Didn't
public would
sit well
disagree with.
with the community.
And for instance, was the case out in San Francisco with the, is that what you're referring to? It was a rape case and
2 hours
an
of fun.
athlete,
2 hours of fun. The
and
father
they felt
said
that the judge was too lenient
Yeah.
on the sentencing.
that didn't sit well with the community.
Right.
I don't think. I don't know. I don't know what
Well,
happened.
I'm not that familiar with California's plan, so I'm not going to, I won't go into that, but in Missouri, you know, the process is, there could be a public outrage.
You know, I'll tell you just a story. The first few months I was on the bench, I had these are the most difficult cases, I think, for judges on sentencing, a drunk driver case, and it was a difficult case. And we asked for the Missouri Sentencing Advisory Committee to do a report. I asked for a report on this guy, and I wanted to know what their recommendation was, and I followed their recommendation. But there's nobody ever satisfied with that sentence, ever. You know, the family or the defendant or the community is very controversial. And in all fairness to judges, those are just, you lose no matter what you do. And so there are a lot of things that happen like that to judges, and they just have to live with it. In that kind of situation, and you don't know really whether the media is giving you the whole story. So it's up to the community to decide, and where you decide that is in your ballot box in the retention elections. It's your right, you know, to vote on that judge as you see fit. And
One of the circumstances, I know they're rare, but when the judge overturns the jury's decision.
Well,
in civil cases, I guess it could happen.
Well, in
I don't remember.
Non-criminal matters.
You mean a judge has the ability to, in civil cases, to reduce the amount that's been awarded?
Or set aside the verdict.
Or set it aside. And what's your question on that?
Well, there was, like I say, it's rare, but the jury said the person was guilty, and the judge said no, they didn't. They reversed that and got away with it.
Against the weight of the evidence, or didn't prove the case. You know, the judge has some discretion in weighing whether, you know, in retrospect, there was a mistake that prejudiced the outcome, and that's very rare. But that is within the judge's power, not to find someone guilty who's been found innocent, though. But it can be the judge setting aside a verdict, saying, you know, there just wasn't enough evidence to get there. And you know what? We get that motion before the jury retires, too. Judge, don't even send it to the jury. There's not enough evidence. And the judge is thinking, oh, I'll let the jury decide. And then the jury decides, and then the judge is still stuck with the decision. Do I have to set aside this verdict? It's hard for the judge. It's very rare. Judges don't like to undo what juries do because it undermines the jury system.
When I asked before about how do you get rid of a judge, it was the Palo Alto case I had in mind. That was not a jury trial. That was a bench trial.
Yeah.
The other thing is he's up for re-election and he's running unopposed in November. So he clearly is going to be back on the court. And if you retain a judge here, is there any way between the two retention elections that the public can agitate for removal?
Not unless there's some disciplinary
No,
proceeding.
I mean, you have to make it, if there's a legitimate complaint, you can make a complaint to the committee that disciplines and rules on removal or the retirement of judges, but they would investigate if there was some legitimate complaint about whatever reason it might be. And if there is, they would make a recommendation. If not, your only recourse is to get someone to run against it next time, or.
And there's a policy behind that. You know, back to the judge's job, not doing the job in fear, you know, of losing your job every time you make a decision. So, I mean, it's just a balancing of concerns.
I'd like to make a suggestion to those people who are concerned about the California decision of Most of them have based their opinion on what they've read in the paper or heard on the radio. The opinion written by the judge was written very well, and a layman can understand it. And his final conclusion was that he hopes that they change the law in California so that he could have given a more severe.
Yeah. Frequently, you see, here's the problem judges have. The only time a judge can explain a decision is, at least in the trial court, because we don't write opinions in the trial court. Very rarely do we write it, unless it's a judge-tried case. The only time I could explain myself was when I was issuing the ruling in the courtroom. And then, once I rule, I am constrained by the Judicial Code of Ethics. I cannot talk about the case anymore, anywhere, publicly or privately. I am not allowed to do it. So the gentleman makes a very good point. You know, you don't know the whole story from reading the newspapers.
You said get someone to run against them. Can someone, an attorney, just say, I'm going to be a judge, you go out there and try and run?
Maybe in California.
Anybody can if they're...
You don't like the judge, there's no one running against them. Get someone to run against them.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
We see that in the legislative elections too, don't we?
Yeah,
Unopposed.
how do you get that other, because they already have judges running.
Yeah.
So you have to get one out of someplace.
Right.
In other words, some guy comes and says, I don't like this guy, and I want to run. What are you going to do?
Well, this is the problem with money in elections. There are a lot of people who don't run for office because they don't want to have to raise $1 gajillion. That's a hard problem to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
What recourse, okay, do a private citizen have when a judge makes a calling, okay, that is simply illegal?
When the judge makes what?
Hands down a decision, okay, in a court, you know, that is illegal. It is strictly, okay, to be specific, okay. It was involved in a family court case, okay, and the law says that there cannot be, I live in Illinois, there cannot be a change of custody, okay, within the first year. This was a long time ago. Within the first year, okay, unless there's been a substantial change of circumstances, okay, or both parties agree. And the judge simply said, okay, that, you know, he knew, okay, the law, because he quoted it.
Good question. This is why we need appellate judges. You appeal it.
Yeah, if you disagree with your trial judge decision, you have a right to. The question, I think, is your recourse is appeals. That's what we have.
Unless there's a violation of the Judicial Code of Ethics, and then you could, you could complain to the Judicial Code of Ethics people. You can file a complaint, which people do.
There's always going to be somebody that disagrees with the judge's ruling. When you have two parties that are on opposite sides making it, there's going to be one side that probably is not happy with the decision. So.
It wasn't a question though about whether it was happy with it or not, a question about whether it was simply in violation of the law.
Yeah, and you know, the number of cases that come before us are quite extensive. There's a certain percentage of them that are reversals. It's a small percentage, you know, maybe 25% are reversals because the judge didn't follow the proper rule of law. So we do reverse, you know, we do reverse and send it back.
You may be right. It's just that the only way you can do it is appeal that decision. So you do have a right to appeal. When it's reviewed, the appellate courts do write a decision, and the Supreme Court. And they
explain
you can
it.
read their decision and spell it out. Yes, sir.
What's the batting average or proportion of retention cases? I mean, how many judges are not retained?
In the
Very
history of
small.
Missouri,
Very small.
2.
And that's a function of a lack of public knowledge about the candidates, I think. We've had lawyers recommend non-retention, but the judge be retained anyway. You know.
So 2 have been voted not to be retained in the history of the nonpartisan.
There's this lady's.
But then I had read in the paper, the family petition to find out was, and as I understood it, the information was given to that family and their lawyers. Then they went back and asked for release to more of their lawyers. I don't know how many they have. But I always thought the grand jury was protected by not making it public who served on the jury.
That's exactly what the issue was in that case. And it was a departure from tradition. And I don't know all the ins and outs about it, but.
I mean, what kind of reason would justify, I mean, to me, if you guaranteed or told the people are going to serve, we will protect you, we won't release your name, and then they find out later that your names are released.
You know, that's the purview of the prosecuting attorney. You know, a prosecutor does the grand jury proceedings, and what happens in those proceedings is the responsibility of the prosecutor.
Wasn't it in federal court? Didn't it end up in federal?
The grand jury told somebody else that it wasn't run correctly, and that started the mess.
I think it's a concern. You raise a concern. Yeah.
Yeah, because why would somebody want to serve on that kind of jury?
Yeah.
Feel threatened?
Well, that's something that the prosecutor would be best to answer for you.
I would not go on the grand jury.
We really appreciate, we have any more questions? Good. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Micah, thanks for coming.